After months of waiting, Dream has finally escaped from prison in Technoblade's most recent Dream SMP stream, and laid the foundations for the next server-wide war. With Technoblade seemingly at the very center of the upcoming conflict, many people are still left wondering who will be fighting who, and most importantly, what will happen to our beloved pig. So I started digging for clues, and what I uncovered terrified me. By analyzing the carefully placed hints throughout Dream SMP's history, we'll be predicting the entire future of the Blade, from his part in the next war all the way to his eventual death. That's right, I believe that Technoblade is fated to die, and the reason why might change how you view the entire storyline. This is the dark future of Technoblade. And before you dislike the video and comment saying, Technoblade never dies, just wait, because spoiler alert, he won't be staying dead for long. Let's be real here, the Dream SMP probably has one of the most complicated storylines to ever exist, and it's easy to be left in the dust still wondering if that 2.5 hour long livestream was canon or not. However, one thing has always been consistent, at least in terms of canonicity, and that's the rare references that members make to Greek mythology. For instance, TommyInnit during the Exile arc was referred to as Theseus, the Greek hero who saved his hometown from a monster named the Minotaur, only to be exiled by the same people he sacrificed blood and tears to protect. The fans who took this hint and did further research on it were able to predict the upcoming Dream SMP event, and as we all know, just like in mythology, Tommy's character on the Dream SMP ended up being exiled by Lemmenburg, the city for whom he gave blood and tears to protect, just like Theseus. This means that if we can find solid evidence that links a character in Greek mythology to a Dream SMP member, it could potentially give us insight into their future. And if you have been following Technoblade's side of the story for the past couple of months, you'd know that Tommy isn't the only member with a mythological counterpart. It's just as Sun Tzu says, to predict what the future might hold, you first need to study the past. Wait, what? That's right, to shine a light at Techno's dark future, we first need to go back in time, to the beginnings of the organization we now know as the Syndicate. For newer viewers, or the old ones who simply forgot, the Syndicate is a group of anarchists with the sole purpose to destroy governments on the Dream SMP. Now, what we want to focus on is the first ever meeting of the organization, or more specifically, the unsolved mystery that emerged from it. You see, during the gathering, Technoblade urged members to create codenames for themselves to use inside the organization. Weirdly enough, everyone decided to go with popular names found in Greek mythology. For example, Phil chose Zephyrus, the Greek deity of the west wind, and Rambu chose Lethe, a lake that, if you drank from it, would erase all of your prior memories. As you might have figured, both the Greek characters and their Dream SMP counterparts share physical and/or psychological similarities. The weirdest of all, however, was Technoblade's choice. Protesilaus, a Greek hero who fought valiantly during the famous Trojan War. And if you're wondering why that's a weird choice for Techno to make, that's because I left the most important parts of the story out. Protesilaus did in fact fight valiantly, but he also died in that war. In fact, after arriving far before his troops and killing 4 enemies, he was slain by the leader of the opposing forces, someone named Hector, making him the first ever Greek to die in the Trojan War. Now, why, out of all people, would Technoblade choose this character as his code name? Is it just a sarcastic joke he's making to confuse people, or does it actually tell us something meaningful about Techno's future? Because let's be honest here, both seem like something Techno would do. Well, I'm personally leaning more towards option 2, as the situation we're facing now is pretty much an exact replica of what Tommy has already went through. Just like with Tommy and Theseus, we already know what happened to Technoblade's Greek mythology counterpart, so all we have to do now is to come up with a Dream SMP scenario that fits most of the major aspects of Protesilaus' story, like the Trojan War and the killer of our protagonist. And here is where the uncanny similarities I mentioned earlier truly start to show themselves. Now, for those of you who haven't seen Technoblade's most recent stream, Jailbreak, I'll give you a quick recap on the events that took place, because you'll be needing it. And while doing so, I want you to try to guess as to how it all connects to Protesilaus' narrative. Now, firstly, Technoblade broke Dream out of prison, along with Rambo and Connor, by mining from underneath the cell, where Techno was outside the range of the Elder Guardian's mining fatigue effect. Now yes, I know, months of build-up just for Techno to break a couple of blocks and waltz on out of the most secure structure on the entire server. Look, just be happy that we got lore and move on, okay? Once they reached the surface, the escapees were instantly greeted by a surprise attack, which was set up by Sam beforehand. And in the midst of all the chaos, Sam managed to take Rambo hostage in order to prevent Techno and Dream from fleeing the scene. Now this would be a very smart move, and it even worked since Techno was content with staying to protect Rambo. Except for the fact that Sam decided to kill Rambo anyways. Before Rambo died, however, he gave Technoblade an image of Michael, who is canonically the adopted child of Rambo and Tubbo, and as we find out later in the stream, Michael had been abducted by who seems to be Sam. Of course, Tubbo didn't take either of the news well, neither Rambo's death or Michael's abduction, and Techno and Tubbo are now on track to help retrieve Michael from wherever they're keeping him. In other words, Techno and Tubbo have major beef with Sam and the rest of the guards, but that anger goes both ways. Think about it this way. Sam had been watching over Dream for nearly 6 months, suffering along with the man he put in the prison. Now that Dream has escaped, the prison is basically useless, and everything Sam has done up until now, each day he sacrificed has been for nothing, and he's looking for someone to blame. That someone just happens to be Technoblade, the man behind the jailbreak. A conflict between these two groups is inevitable, and with the addition of outside help, that small spark could quickly shape into a raging inferno. But wait, what do I mean by outside help? Well, the Syndicate along with Tubbo far outpower and outnumber Sam and the guards. If they were to battle, the fight would be very one-sided and anticlimactic. However, as some of you might know, Sam is currently still a part of Las Nevadas, a government founded by Quackity that holds some of the richest individuals on the server. And with the prison staff now homeless due to the prison being out of order, the only place they have left to go is Las Nevadas. Also, I put an emphasis on government since the Syndicate's purpose is to destroy hierarchies on the Dream SMP. And once they find out that Sam, the man who killed one of their members, is taking refuge inside a government, Techno and the others will not hesitate to strike in an attempt to take out 2 birds with 1 stone, or in this case, a whole bunch of TNT and golden apples. So now, not only do we have a conflict that could easily be considered a war, which matches with the Trojan War in Protesilaus' narrative, but we also have candidates to take Hector's place in the story. Hector, as I've mentioned before, was the man who ended Protesilaus' life in Greek mythology, and was the leader of the opposing forces. Now, looking at our table of characters on the opposing faction, who here best fits the description of Hector? I'll give you a second to think about it, but I feel like the answer is fairly simple. Quackity. Not only is Quackity a naturally gifted leader and of course the president of Las Nevadas, but he also still holds a grudge against Techno, because he was the one who took one of his canon lives on the Dream SMP. If all of that wasn't enough to convince you, just take a look at the number of enemies left on the opposing team if we were to take Quackity or Hector out of the picture. 4. The same number of Trojans that Protesilaus had slain before being killed himself, and the same number of enemies that Technoblade will most likely have to battle before being killed by Quackity. Coincidence? I think not. But wait, if you've been paying close attention to the video right from the start, you probably remember me saying that Technoblade won't be staying dead for long. And that wasn't a joke, because apparently in Greek mythology, after Protesilaus' death, his wife was so sad that once she pleaded to the gods for Protesilaus to be revived, the absolute simps allowed him to come back from the dead. Now, Technoblade doesn't have a wife as a replacement for Protesilaus' wife in Greek mythology, but what he does have are friends, which just so happens to include a certain green blob with the ability to revive the dead. We've predicted the next war and the many deaths along with it. So what's next? Well, there's only one way to find out. Subscribe,